piece of junk.
Welcome to this edition of Trash Compactor. In this episode I'll be making Prune Face's pals from Return of the Jedi. So in the briefing room you can see Prune Face with his eye patch on the right and his two pals. So I've got three Prune Face figures, and what I'm going to be doing is removing the eye patches and the eyes, replacing the eyes and then repainting the figures. What I'm going to start by doing is using a exacto knife, trimming away the moulding of the eye patch. So work your way around the head, trimming off the eye patch. Be careful while doing this, because while doing it I actually cut my finger by sticking the Stanley knife straight into my thumb. And I've come back to my figure, and as you can see I've started to cut away where the eye patch actually sits on the face. And now I'm just going to use my Dremel to smooth the head down, but not smoothing it too carefully because the Prune Face character does have quite a lot of detail and bumpy skin, so I want to try and maintain that around the entire head. So the idea is of going slowly dremeling away at the eye sockets, and then I'm trying to actually create an indent, and this will be done equally on both sides. So rather than leaving one eye and trying to make the one eye match the other eye, I'm going to take away both of the eyes and replace them both, so then they look the same and don't look so different. As trying to duplicate the left hand eye to match the right eye is so difficult. It will still look a bit rough, but I'll show you how to fix that. So I've dremeled out both the eyes. The skin around the head is still a little bit rough. So once you've done this, one of the solutions for smoothing the plastic down is to give the head a really good coating using liquid poly. What liquid poly does, it's really good for gluing two plastic surfaces together. However, as it slightly melts the plastic, all those little bits that are sticking up, the little remnants that you couldn't sand off, by applying several coats of liquid poly, slowly just gently melts the surface of the plastic and makes it smoother, but it doesn't remove the detail. So I'm giving this a good soak around the eyes, around the head, all around the face, and the idea is to let that dry off for a while and then come back and apply another coat, and do that 2 or 3 times until I'm happy with how smooth the head looks, so it looks more like the original. Once it's got to a certain stage, you wouldn't even know there was been an eye patch there. Be careful with this stuff because it absolutely stinks. Make sure you're in a very well ventilated room. Also be careful not to get the liquid poly soaking into the neck joint, because that will actually bond it to the body. So while it's drying, give the head a turn a couple of times just to make sure that you keep it loose, because if you did get the liquid poly in there, left it for half an hour to dry off, came back, the head will be completely welded. So be careful not to do that. So I'll leave that figure to dry for a bit, and while it's doing that I can then work on the second one. So I'm going to use the Dremel straight off. So a bit of a last tidy up with the exacto knife, and then as you can see he's pretty much done. Still little bits of particles on there, you can rub them off with sandpaper, give him a bit of a brush off, or you can just get the liquid poly and give him a few coats, and you can see the difference already. There's the first one I did with liquid poly compared to the second one. And again, give it a really good lathering. So those guys have been drying for a while now. As you can see, they're a lot smoother. It's taken away a lot of the little bumps and ridges. They don't look exactly the same, but that's good. I don't want them to look exactly the same. I want the characters to look a little bit different. So what I'm going to do here is, where I've taken out the eyes, is actually put in a little bit of milli putty into each of the eye sockets and recreate the eyes on each character ready for me to paint. I could paint straight onto the figure, but the trouble is they'd be slightly indented. Follow the instructions on your milli putty. You only need a very small amount, a couple of little blobs of each. Divide it up into 4 little balls, slightly elongate it so it's in an oval shape, and then it's a case of just trying to pop it into each of the figure's eye sockets. Not flatten it too much, but just trying to keep it slightly raised. So once you've got the milli putty in place, it's just a case of shaping it. Pop it into the eye socket. Best to put it in both sides first, and then once you've got it in, then you can use your exacto knife to then slowly sculpt the milli putty into eye shapes and make sure it's in the right place. One thing you have to be careful of, because milli putty is so sensitive, is be careful not to get too much of a fingerprint on it when you do it. You can smooth it out literally by wetting your finger and just rubbing it across the front of the milli putty. So I spent a bit of time here just trimming away, just trying to get the shape of the eyeballs to come together. And of course, once you've done one figure, you then carry on and do the second. There we are, that's them both done. So what I need to do now is leave them both to dry so the milli putty is nice and hard, ready for painting. So they've both dried now. What I'm going to do is mix some paint to paint the heads and cover the eyes. I actually mixed the paint for the eyes first, and then once I'd mixed it, realised that I'd forgotten to do the paint for the head. So I've taken that part out and moved it further on in the video to when I should have mixed it. So you'll notice that when I start picking the figure up to paint the eyes, they're unpainted. And then that's when I realise and go back and repaint them. So the video's jumped around a little bit. So to mix the paint for the heads, I'm going to use a little coffee pot lid to mix my paint in. These are quite good because they're stackable, so if you do want to leave your paint there without drying out, you can pop one on top. Works as another lid. I'm going to be using Umbral 93, and then to that I'll be adding some Gloss 22. So mix them two together, and then of course add accordingly more white if you need it, or more 93. So this is a good colour match, so I'm going to apply that quite liberally over the entire head. Also, the figure that I'm doing was a bit of a damaged beta figure, so if you notice, the arms aren't actually the prune head arms, they're actually arms off a damaged Bespin Luke that I had, and I put them onto this figure. So it's looking still a little bit rough. Could have put more liquid poly on, but I was quite satisfied that once I painted him, it would sort of help smooth him over a little bit. Also need to cover up the little black band that still remains at the back of the head. Didn't go all the way down because I didn't want to catch the shoulders of the figure with the Dremel. It's hidden behind the back of the head, so you won't be seen. So make sure that when you do the head, you also do the hands, because they are Luke's hands, so they are a different colour, and I do want the hands and the head to match. The second figure, I'm going to add a little bit of 26, which is almost like a chocolate brown. Add a few spots of this into the paint just to create a little bit of a darker skin tone. So again, they don't look identical. And then give that a good liberal painting all over the face, and again the hands so they match. On the camera they look so similar you can't really tell the difference, but in reality there is a little bit of a difference between the skin tones from the original figure and the two painted ones. So I'll paint the first coat, give that a minute or two to dry off, and then paint another coat. So there we go, I've painted both of my prune pals. I just need to leave them to dry for a little while. So they've had a little bit of time to dry off. What I'm going to do now is start painting the bodies, so they don't look identical to the original Prune Face. And what I'll be doing is painting the waistcoats, the trousers and the boots in similar shades, so they all look like they're in the same colour palette, but they don't exactly match. So using the brown 26, this is where I'm going to paint the guy's waistcoat. So that's his waistcoat painted. Next thing I'm going to do is, in the same paint, is paint the other guy's trousers. So that's his trousers painted. I'll give them time to dry and come back to them later. Right, this is where I messed up in the video. As you can see, my figures here are before I started painting them. This is where I started mixing the colour for the eyes to make the orange. And then it wasn't until I mixed this paint that I suddenly realised I forgot to paint the heads. So that's why this part of the video is showing the figures unpainted. So what I did for getting the colour for the eyes is I mixed satin 174, and then I took a yellow 66 or 99. I still don't know and need to look that up because I'm not sure. I quite like, let's call it yellow 66. I'm using the 66 because the matte 24 I've got is really watery. I think I've got a dodgy batch, so I'm going to have to buy a new one of these. Finally mix my paint, and then this is where I think, oh, I'll start to paint and then go, oh no, stop painting, you forgot to paint the heads. So anyway, while that paint is drying off on the figures, I'm just going to show you how you can make the cape. If you can find something that's similar to this, great. I just happened to find some felt, and I quite like to make any capes and cloaks out of felt. It's a nice thin felt that I got from a haberdashery store. The capes I should be making should be white and probably a grey to match the 3 prune face figures that are in the film. I couldn't find any grey, so I'm actually going to be using a white and a brown. The way I do this is I take the original cape and try and fold it in half to where there's less of a seam showing. So on the original cape there isn't really a seam, as you can see in the picture. There's only a slight seam curving from the middle of the top of the back up to the head to create the curve. So I take the cape as a template, and then we'll grab a piece of chalk, or you can use tailoring chalk. The reason why I use that is because it wipes off the fabric. And then all I do is just simply draw around it to try and duplicate the shape onto the felt. So once the template's drawn out, that just gives me an idea of where I need to cut with the scissors. Because I'm using felt, the edges aren't going to fray, so I don't need to worry about that. Cut as neat as possible to create smooth edges. And there we go, there's my first cape shape. So as you can see, it's got the join down the middle where it will form the back of the cape, and then I can stitch across the top, which will create the curve. So I'm going to repeat that in the other colour felt that I have. Again, should be grey, but I couldn't find grey, so I ended up with brown, which is fine. So I've got both my capes cut out, just need to now sew them together. So making sure I'm using contrasting thread, fold the fabric over and start sewing over the curve, making sure that the side of the fabric I want to be on the inside is showing on the outside, because again, when you finish, you're going to turn it inside out. Just slowly stitch my way around the top of the cape. When you get to the end, create a couple of loops and pull it, and that will create a knot. Yep, give that a snip. So as you can see, there's the curve created on the cape. So what I need to do now is to stitch up the front, and again, turn it back inside out. Remember, don't stitch too far into the fabric because you'll cause ruching, so try and stick as close to the edge as you can. You just want to create a very small seam. So there we go, I've got my cape out. I'll stick it on the original prune face because the other ones are still painted. See what it looks like. I think that looks quite effective. Probably a bit better grey, but never mind. And then I'll do the same with the white one. So there we go. Try that again on the turn it inside out. Try that on the prune face character. There we go. He's got his cape on. And again, it looks quite good. Looks more set for Hoth than jungle, to be honest. These guys are dried off now, so what I'm going to do is now paint the eyes. So getting a good blob of the paint on the paintbrush, and then going to stick a blob along the eye sockets and just pull it across. Make sure I'm quite liberal. So create a little bit of a bubble for the eye. Then once that's done, pop him to the side to dry off. And then repeat the same on the other figure. So there we go. My guys have now got painted eyes. I've continued to paint them a little bit further. So I've painted one of the arms to match his trousers, and also painted the other guy's boots, and also painted his trousers in a grey 156, which is a really nice gunmetal-y grey, which looks quite good. So there we go, we've got the original prune face with his green trousers, we've got the new guy with his brown, and the guy on the right with his grey. They've all got slightly alternate clothing. The last thing I need to do is to finish the eyes off. So to do this, I've got a permanent water and fade proof pigment ink pen. It's very, very small, 0.05. I'm going to use that to create the snake-like eyes. So make sure you keep them quite central because you don't want him to be boss-eyed. There we go. I've finished my figures. So they look quite good even without the capes. So I'll pop their capes on now to give the final effect, and as you can see, they look quite good. I've got a couple of weapons that I've had lying around, so I've given them all slightly different guns, and I think that makes a good set of figures for my collection. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more in the future or suggest some potential future makes, please subscribe.
What a piece of junk!